So, here's the thing. I brought some props today. I have my handy-dandy trusty wand, and over here, you'll see this is Professor MacGonagall. Now, in case you didn't know this about me, I am, and have been for a considerable amount of my life, a huge Harry Potter fan. Big surprise, right? My copy of the Chamber of Secrets actually still has my name, the Victoria MacDonald Class 2 cook, in it, in case you misplaced it at school and somebody had to bring it back to your classroom. It's missing pages, but it's got that page. I never lost it because books are important, but it's always good to be prepared. So all of that being said, when I was asked if I could put together a sermon about the Transfiguration, my mind went straight to the Hogwarts class, taught by Professor McGonagall. And if you haven't completely been overwhelmed by the Harry Potter franchise over the last couple of decades, then let me give you a quick rundown. Professor McGonagall has the ability to transform from a human into a cat, and then back again. She teaches the Transfiguration class at school, and she teaches the children a series of spells that can change something from one thing into another. The first time we see her class, she is changing animals into goblets. And it's really cool. It's really cool. It's a cool trick. She's a cool character. Everything's amazing. Now, as it turns out, the liturgical calendar had something different in mind. Yeah, in this week's scripture that Rick just read for us, Harry Potter's not mentioned at all. Now, the meaning of transfiguration itself, it's still the same. The dictionary says it is a complete change of form or appearance from something into a more beautiful or spiritual state. It's intense. It is a moment where something changes from one thing into another thing. Pretty straightforward, right? You would think. And in the substance of our scripture reading today, Jesus has gone up to the mountaintop with a couple of his closest friends. Peter, James, and John are standing up there with him, and all of a sudden his face begins to shine. His clothes become this bright white, and he is standing there on the mountaintop with two of the more influential members of history. Moses and Elijah are suddenly there having this afternoon conversation with Jesus. It's crazy. The disciples have grown up knowing who these people are. They read about them every week in their version of Sunday school. And now suddenly, these people are standing right in front of their faces. Now, where I come from, and I'm sure many of you, hospitality is one of the greatest virtues a person can have. So I, and I'm sure many others, completely relate to Peter as he watches all of this amazing, spectacular things happen. And he goes, whoa, let me set up some chairs. Let me make a little shelter so that you can all, sit down and chat comfortably. He's one step away from just going and putting on the kettle. Making tea. That's what we Maritimers do, right? And then while he's offering this hospitality, this voice breaks open from the heavens. And God says, "This is my son, and I am well pleased with him." This glorious moment where everything that we've been pretty sure about at this point in Jesus' ministry, there's been rumors, and we, as the disciples, we're about 90% sure that this guy really is the Son of God. And suddenly in this moment, it's true. It's being proven, given to us. It is irrefutably true, undeniably, indisputably, unquestionably, undoubtedly true. I had a little bit of fun with the thesaurus. And it is that because they heard it in God's own voice. So I had a lot of trouble writing this sermon. I've known I was going to do it for just over a month, and I will admit, this time yesterday, it still was not ready. There's a lot going on, and I have struggled to put all these little pieces together. We have this grand title, The Transfiguration, capitalized and everything. And this moment, this grand moment in the Bible gets barely 10 verses. It's just this little paragraph tucked in amongst everything else. Yet somehow, we're supposed to feel as if it's this tremendous tipping point. It is the moment of no return, where Jesus changes from this regular feller that it was, and he becomes the Messiah that we've all been excited for. And when you sit and you look at it, it's not nearly that straightforward. Because Jesus wasn't transformed on that mountain. Sure, there was a fancy little light show. I mean, his clothes were suddenly turned into this bright, and I assume clean, white color. And what does that mean? Jesus has this conversation with two historical figures, but the words weren't important enough to write down. We don't know what they were talking about. Could have been talking about the weather or the latest sports stats in heaven. I don't know. I could probably guess it wasn't sports, but it's always one of the options. Who knows? We don't. God speaks from the heavens, and he announces that this man is his son. But we've all heard that before too. In fact, those exact words were spoken at his baptism at the River Jordan. This is my son, with whom I am well pleased. So what's the important part here? What's new? What's transforming? And the answer, as it turns out, is us. Jesus doesn't become the Messiah in that moment, but the disciples are now convinced that it's true. The disciples watch their own history come forth and prove to them a point that they had believed in their minds up until now. But now, in this moment, they believed with their hearts. Peter, James, and John are transformed into true disciples. Jesus hasn't transformed in front of us, but we are each transformed into seeing him the way he truly is. Not what we want to see or what we wish to see, but what truly is. And that moment of transfiguration, in many ways, is the point of no return. After we witness that moment, when we live that moment, we feel the moment, then there's no way you can ever see anything else. Once you truly know that everyone is a child of God, how could you perpetuate hate? Once you see that all things are good, how could you ever think less? Once you know that God is proud of you, how could you ever believe anything else? The whole world is now seen in its truth, and it's wonderful. After witnessing this spectacular moment, Jesus then goes ahead to tell his disciples to keep it a secret. Wait until later. And there's a reason for that. Not because Jesus is hiding who he really is, but because that moment of transfiguration wasn't meant to be shared. That moment when you come into that realization, where you cross the threshold of no return, that is a moment between you and God, between you and Jesus, and that moment is wholly and truly yours. It's special. It's sacred. Now, part of me looks at the little tiny scripture reading and says, well, it's all a little bit too easy for them, isn't it? Anyone could have a major moment of transfiguration if the figures of your scripture stood right in front of you and you were able to interact with them. that's sort of right in your face. You can't not. But then I stopped to think, isn't that what we're doing every week? Aren't we sitting here, coming to be in this place together so that we can each interact with our scriptures on a personal level? Sometimes that's listening to the scriptures themselves. Sometimes it's the music that moves our soul. Sometimes it's this sermon time that helps us come to our realizations. We all come here because it means something to us. We come here because it allows us to be transformed. In that moment of transfiguration, whether your moment is within these walls or not, it's the moment that means we see Jesus in a brand new light. It means that we see everyone in a new light. We have been transformed to see everyone through the lens of God's love. And honestly, it is a beautiful world. So thanks be to God.